Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I just want to quickly introduce myself. I'm Sarah, and sorry the lighting in here is really not the best, but just gonna have to do for now. Anyway, I decided I wanted to start vlogging for several reasons. First of all, me and my kids and my family love looking back at old videos of our family and seeing all the fun things that we have done, and not just the fun things, even the hard times and different things. And I thought it would be a great way for us to document our lives and to always have that as a diary of our lives. And so that's one of the reasons. Another reason that we started this was a year and a half ago I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and at that time when I was diagnosed, I went on YouTube seeking out other people who had also been diagnosed, and just to get their story and see other people in action with this diagnosis. And there was some that I could find, but I was really surprised at how little I could find on it. And anyway, so this has been something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I feel like I have a story to share, and I feel that if I can help one person to feel better about their situation and to show one person that you can live a positive life and things can be good, then I feel that makes me feel really good if I can just even help one person. And so that's another part of why I wanted to start vlogging, was to see, to connect with people and to share my story. And anyway, so enough with that. So I'm going to start doing videos once a week to see, there's a lot I want to introduce you to my family. I want to share more about myself with you. But today's video, I really wanted to just talk about my MS diagnosis. So like I said, a year and a half ago, it was June 27th to be exact, I woke up. I had gone to bed the night before with a headache, and I woke up the next morning with that same headache. It was one of those headaches where you can tell that when you go to bed, it's still going to be there in the morning. I took Tylenol, several things, and nothing was even touching it. And and I don't really get headaches that often, but this was one that I could tell was going to be an intense one. So sure enough, I woke up in the morning and I still had this headache, and I went throughout the day, and it hurt to move my eyes. It was behind my eyes, behind my right eye in particular. And every time I moved my eyes, it was really painful, and it just was constantly there. So I'd taken several things, nothing was working, and so I kind of just dealt with it. Well, after a few days of this, I decided to call my mother-in-law, who works for an ophthalmologist. And she talked to the doctor, and he said 90% of the time it is a sinus infection or something to do with your sinuses. So just try taking Afrin for the next few days, and that should take care of it. So in the meantime, we had planned a vacation to go to Yellowstone. And so I got some Afrin, and we packed up and went to Yellowstone, and it was kind of miserable because to move my eye, it was painful, which, you move your eye all the time. And so I tried the Afrin the whole time we were in Yellowstone. I also took some allergy medicine. Maybe it's allergies. Took ibuprofen, took extra strength Tylenol. Nothing was even touching this headache. And so we got home from Yellowstone, and I knew I just needed to go to the doctor. This was not going away, and it had been 2 weeks at this point. So I went to the Instacare thinking it's probably just, something they can easily prescribe, like an antibiotic or something for. And so they thought it might be a sinus infection, and they prescribed some amoxicillin for me to take. And the thing was, I didn't have any other symptoms as far as your typical sinus infection symptoms. I didn't have a stuffy nose, nothing like that. It was just a headache behind my eye. So in the back of my mind, I thought, I don't think this is a sinus infection, but we'll start there. We'll take the antibiotic. Maybe it will clear up whatever is going on. So I started taking the antibiotic, and usually when you do have a problem, an infection or something, and you start on antibiotics, after a couple days you start to feel better. Well, I did not start to feel better. I only got worse. And so after a few days of the antibiotic, I decided I should just go straight to an ENT and get their opinion. So I went into the ENT, and sure enough, he looked at everything and he said, your sinuses are just fine. It's not a sinus infection. It's not your ears. It's not anything to do with that. And he said, I think it's something to do with your eye, and I think you need to go to an ophthalmologist ASAP. So, I definitely got the feeling from him that it was something serious and I needed to do something quickly. So that day I called the ophthalmologist again, and they got me in that same day. And this time, as I was meeting with him, he was acting a little more serious, and I could tell he had some concerns, but I didn't know why. I had no idea. At this point, I thought, well, what on earth could it be? Do I have a brain tumor? What? I had no idea. And so he said, we're going to send you to get an MRI on your brain, and it's to rule out optic neuritis, which is when your optic nerve has swelling going on. And the reason we need to rule out optic neuritis is because that is typically one of the first symptoms of multiple sclerosis. So when he told me that, I just kind of sat there like, okay, let's do it. But totally not on my radar whatsoever. That never, it's usually, it's not something that most people are thinking that, it's one of those things you think, one day I could get cancer, one day I could get these things, but MS just wasn't even on that list. It wasn't on my radar. So they scheduled me for MRI the next day at the hospital. And in the meantime, you're just kind of waiting and wondering and thinking, wow, MS, like you immediately think of anybody you know who might have MS. And I did know one person, and their case was pretty severe. And so they use a walker and have a lot of problems. And so I kind of was just thinking in the back of my mind, I don't think it really is MS, but I really hope it's not. And anyway, so the next day comes, and about an hour before my appointment, I had gotten a babysitter for my kids and everything, and they called me and said, hey, can we reschedule your appointment for tomorrow, because we have, some things that have come up and we need to take care of them, and we just don't have time. And so I was really disappointed because, this is my life, and I was kind of on hold waiting to figure out what was going on. But I understand, things happen, and so we rescheduled for the next day. So I went in on Saturday, had the MRI, and I was really worried about getting the MRI because I'm pretty claustrophobic, and I had never had one before. And they laid me down, and I tried to just be calm, and they put this cage over my face, which was immediately not comfortable, but luckily they put bean bags over my ears. Well, they gave me earplugs and then put bean bags over my ears. And then the cage that I had, it had a mirror that I could look out and see the technician the whole time. And so that mirror, I think, saved me. And it was really loud, and so I was glad to have the earplugs. But it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. So it lasted about 45 minutes altogether. And then it was the weekend, so I had to wait And Monday came around, and since my mother-in-law worked for the ophthalmologist, she called me and sent me the results of what was sent to the ophthalmologist. And of course, it's impossible to understand what it says on the sheet, but essentially I had 11 lesions on my brain that were similar to those found in multiple sclerosis. And so they immediately sent me to a neurologist. We found a neurologist and went in that same week and met with the nurse practitioner. I actually never even saw my first experience with the neurologist wasn't a good one. I ended up finding a new neurologist, but that's another story. Anyway, I met with them, and they didn't really tell me any information. I met with them because, this was the next step, and they asked me a bunch of questions and did a bunch of different tests, had me walk up and down the hallway, timed me, a bunch of things like that, but didn't really say why they were doing it or what it was for. And then finally she said, well, most likely you do have multiple sclerosis, but before we can actually say for sure that's what you have, there's not a real definitive way to say, here's a test, we're going to check and for sure you have multiple sclerosis. It's basically you have to rule out everything else first. So thus began my journey of figuring out what I don't have. And so I ended up getting 2 more MRIs, one on my neck and then another one down my spine. And I also got a lot of blood work done. And then they also did a lumbar puncture or a spinal tap. And so the MRI on my neck showed I did have 3 more lesions, and which when I first was being diagnosed, I'm like, what the heck is a lesion? They kept using that word. And so basically multiple sclerosis is when your immune system, your body attacks the myelin sheath on your nerve, the coating around your nerves. And so there's spots on your nerves that get damaged, and so therefore when your brain signals to your body to do something, wherever there's damage, it has a misfiring, essentially. And so I had a lot of these lesions where there was damage. There had been inflammation, and there was inflammation going on at that time. And so in order to fix my headache and to take care of the current inflammation, they put me on a IV for 3 days, and I each day would infuse myself with a steroid injection, basically. And that did solve the headache and took care of that problem. So anyway, and then the spinal tap, that was awful. The procedure itself was fine. If you've ever had an epidural, it was similar to that. It wasn't anything crazy. I had to lie flat for 24 hours, and then after 24 hours I could get up. If I started to have a headache, I needed to lie down for another 24. So sure enough, after 24 hours I had a headache when I would get up, and so I lied down for another 24 hours, and then it didn't go away. So I called the doctor, and they said, well, we're going to have you lay down for another 24 hours, and I really want you to lay down this time. Make sure you're completely flat, which I was the first round. So I lied down again, and it was just getting worse. It was awful. And so I was in bed flat for 6 days total. They ended up doing a blood patch where they had done the spinal tap, and usually that fixes spinal headaches right away. However, mine didn't work. It didn't work immediately. I was so discouraged, and that was one of the hardest parts about this whole process, was that spinal headache. It was a long week, and I have 3 kids, and it was rough. Thankfully, I have family and friends that were there to help me, and But I got the spinal or the blood patch, and then after about 24 hours it did start to work. And so thankfully I could get up again and slowly get back to myself. But that was the hardest part about this whole thing so far. Including, it was way worse than the headache behind my eye, any of that. Anyway, so they fixed that, and then I met with the neurologist once again after all of these tests were done and they got the results back. And essentially they said, well, we've ruled out everything else. You don't have this, you don't have that. And there's multiple things it could have been, like Lyme disease, several different things, and I didn't have any of those. And all the characteristics were matching up with multiple sclerosis. And so they said, you do most likely have MS. And so we're going to start you on a treatment plan and go from there. And so that day I started medicine, which was an injection I had to give myself 3 times a week. And then they said, in 6 more months, we'll do all these tests again. We'll do another spinal tap and everything. And I thought, ugh, are you serious? But, you know, my attitude from the very beginning was, you know, if this is what's going to happen, then let's just deal with it. And the not knowing part is, I think, the hardest thing. And I know there's people that go years with problems and don't get a diagnosis. So thankfully, I feel like I was lucky enough to just immediately be diagnosed and start treatment and just deal with it. And that was my attitude. I just, you know what, if that's what it is, okay, I can deal with it. Just tell me what to do and let's move on with life. And from the beginning, I've had a positive attitude, and it just really hasn't, not saying that there aren't days where I'm just kind of bummed out about it, but I'm certainly not happy about it. But it is what it is, and I have a choice to make. I can choose to just deal with it and live my life to the fullest, or I can complain and be depressed about it, and that's only going to make things worse. So I'm thankful that I have that attitude and that I can have that attitude. I know that, you know, for some people it's a lot harder, and I haven't had many symptoms. I'll do another video about about my journey so far, but this is just more about my diagnosis and that process. So it was really overwhelming to me when I was diagnosed. I feel like it just hit me out of left field, and I wasn't expecting it, and who would be? But thankfully, I feel like having a support system is huge. My husband is amazing, and he has, you know, from the beginning said, you know, we'll deal with this, and no matter what this means, we can handle it. And all of my family have been that way, and it's been wonderful. So I think that's a big thing, is making sure that you have a good support system and to encourage you when you do have hard times. And, you know, I think getting as much information and becoming as educated as you can. There's a lot of information out there. There's the National Multiple Sclerosis Society that has tons of information. You can join one of their charters or whatever, and they have them all over. There's tons of different events going on to raise awareness, to earn money for that, and to earn money for research. And that's how I deal with things, is finding out as much as possible. And the thing with multiple sclerosis is that you can talk to 1,000 people, and every one of those people can have different symptoms. It can be different for each of them. So it's really hard to kind of generalize it, because it's an individual thing for everybody. And anyway, I know too that it could always be worse. I'm thankful that I don't have cancer. I'm thankful that this is something that's come a long way. There's been so much research and updates in medication, and I know that I can live a pretty normal lifestyle, and I'm thankful for that. anyway, I look forward to doing more of these videos. They're not going to all be about MS. Like I said, I have 3 kids, and I want to introduce each of them to you, and we'll do, like I said, I'm going to try and do 1 video a week starting out, and then go from there once I get this figured out more. But there's a lot I want to share and document my life, and I am also 35 weeks pregnant right now, and so have a lot going on, and I would like to document that too. So I like to do a baby pregnancy update and record that, and also I want to document the birth of this baby. So lots of fun things and exciting things happening soon, and anyway, I look forward to doing more videos. If you're interested in getting to know more about me and my family, subscribe, and I look forward to getting to connect with each of you. Thank you.